It's all about passion, it's all about change. It's all inclusive every day of the week. When the world comes together, united as one, sharing stories through the eyes of View TV.
Hello everyone! Welcome back to What Matters. I'm Jojo.
And I'm Jess.
And we are back for another week. We had last week off. You know, sometimes us girls need a week off.
We did have it off, but we went on another show with, what's his name, William.
With William. We were at home last week. Another program that we run here on View TV. But look, you know, this week we've got another great guest lined up, Morgan Jonas, who I'm really excited to bring on. But before I do bring him on, I always love to, you know, acknowledge the traditional landowners of people of where we gather today, pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nations. So I've just seen how everyone is, you know, it's been a couple of weeks. And
oh man, a couple of crazy weeks. You see what's been going on around the world? Well, a lot.
and Melbourne, obviously, you know, has been the centre of attention. I think a lot of people around the world are really looking down at Melbourne and thinking, what the hell is going on?
And thankfully, you know, Morgan, he lives in Melbourne, so we are going to talk to him about what's going on down there, how it's affecting the public, how it's affecting him and his livelihood. So I'm pretty excited to bring him on for a chat about everything.
Yeah, and Morgan's really all about the people. And I think, you know, if you haven't noticed, everyone that we bring onto our show every week, it's all about the people. I think we've all slowly steering away from mainstream media because not knowing whether or not we're being fed the truth at the moment. I don't know. My opinion is I feel like we're being fed lies. That may be just my opinion. But I think since, you know, COVID started earlier this year, there's been lots of cracks and lots of just things that haven't lined up. And I know Morgan's been someone who's been really, really, really vocal, and he really is for the people. And, you know, and what matters is, I call it knowledge by the people, for the people. So I guess, like, in saying that, we know time travels, it goes too fast. Yes. So I think, you know what, without further ado, let's get Morgan on and have a chat with him. So let's bring him on.
Welcome to the replay, Friday night, reporting live from Melbourne, Australia. Thanks for watching the replay. If you are, please go ahead and share it to the group, share it to the Stop the Sale of Victoria group, which is growing so well. Super happy to see so many of you posting great content. It's incredible to see the house of cards coming down, everything crumbling down upon Daniel Andrews. The truth is getting out there. The people are finally learning that this so-called COVID-19 pandemic, we're seeing that it's no more dangerous than the flu, and even the most subservient people to the mainstream media and the words of the government are starting to wake up, right? All around the world, every single day we're seeing new reports showing that COVID-19 is not nearly as infectious as we originally thought. The New York Times published an article just a few days ago showing that perhaps as much as 90% of people turning up COVID positive may not even be contagious, may not even have enough virus in their body to transmit it to another person. So that's another thing that they're not telling us. You see, Daniel Andrews and Brett Sutton and DHHS, they'll have you believe that taking a COVID-19 test is a basic matter of either you have it or you don't. But what they don't tell you is that the viral content in infected people's bodies is hugely important. There are people, okay, and these tests are super sensitive, and I'm going to talk to you about that more, but there are people that have such small amounts of virus that they should be turning up COVID negative because they are no risk of transmitting COVID-19 to another person. But of course, that goes against the narrative of Daniel Andrews and his crooked criminal cabinet and that guy by the name of Brett Sutton. It goes against their narrative, right? Because they want to scare you. They want you to believe that if you get COVID-19, you're going to die. Well, their lies are coming undone. Okay, they say they listen to science, but guess what? They listen to the science that suits their narrative. And I say science in inverted commas.
Wow.
Well said.
Well said.
What a way to start the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Morgan. Look, I've been following you personally. I've seen some of your videos that you've been trying to educate people out there, trying to give them an alternative view other than what's being portrayed on our everyday media. And I must say, some of the facts that you're presenting are exactly that. They're facts. And why the hell are we not going off these facts right now?
Thank you. And thanks a lot for having me on, ladies. It's very much appreciated. So that's the question that everybody's asking, I suppose. We're seeing a lot of facts and studies coming from all across the world right now regarding COVID-19, regarding comorbidities from people who have passed away, the rate of infection. What we're learning is that it has been very much blown out of proportion. But of course, our Premier, Daniel Andrews, is not listening. And that's the question on a lot of people's minds, including my own. I've got a few theories, but of course, we don't know exactly what's going on in this man's brain.
Yes, I don't think anyone knows what's going on. And you look at what's been going down. What's been going on down in Melbourne, just with the curfews. Let's just talk about the curfews. You're down in Melbourne. You've been experiencing,
I am, yes.
And I must say, since this all started back in March, Victoria has had the strictest lockdown measures implemented. And then we saw it all kind of unfold, and especially recently where, Dan can't, we can't pinpoint who's actually decided on the curfew because it hasn't now come from the chief health officer, hasn't come from the police department, and it for some reason Dan can't pinpoint
which experts it was. Who is it?
So who are we getting our advice from?
That's a very good question, and the Victorian people have been left in the dark. So when it came to the curfew, we were all under the impression that it was a directive from the chief health officer, and that we had the point of view that the chief health officer had given this directive for health purposes, that it was medical advice. But what we've found out is that it was not actually the idea of Brett Sutton. He doesn't really recall being consulted on it. The chief commissioner, Patton, it's not his idea. Okay, so he came out and told us that it wasn't the idea of the police and that the police did not request a curfew. So whose idea was it? It really only leaves one person, Daniel Andrews. And he claims that he consulted the police and that he consulted medical experts. But yeah, both the CHO and the chief commissioner, they're both denying requesting it. So we have to think that it's essentially a measure imposed by Andrews himself.
So yet another lie. And it seems to be a pattern.
Yeah, it's a lie.
Dan, I mean, if anyone's watching him religiously and you're watching these media conferences, and every time he gets posed a hard question from a journalist, and a real question that the people want to know about, he deflects, he continuously deflects the issue, and he never answers the question.
Well, that's right. And that's indicative of his personality. He'll never take responsibility for anything that has gone wrong. He didn't take responsibility for the mess up with the hotel quarantine. He'll say that he'll deflect the question, or he'll give a very watered down answer, such as, "Oh, I'm the premier. I take responsibility for everything that happens in the state," but he won't get to the core of the question. So I think the Victorian people are starting to see him for what he is. And you're absolutely right in your observation. He dodges the question. He tries to pass the buck, and he looks dead into our eyes and he lies to us. And I think people are getting sick of it.
Yeah, and I don't feel like it's just been one lie after another. Back to the hotel quarantine, it's proven now that 99% of the cases did come from that saga, and yet no one is taking any type of ownership. There's been these continuous lies fed, and I feel like there's, more and more people are becoming awake to this corruption that's going on, but still a lot of people are staying silent. Sometimes I'm like, what is going on down in Melbourne, and why aren't people waking up to what's going on? It's crazy.
Well, yeah, Daniel Andrews plays on our greatest fears. So I think we can all probably agree that one of the greatest fears we have as humans is death, the concept of dying, right? And Daniel Andrews plays on that fear to instill, in order to coerce us into complying with these draconian measures that he and a very small group of his colleagues are enforcing upon the people of Victoria. He will exploit the deaths of people who have passed away, young and old, for the purpose of scaring us into submission. And unfortunately, I think it's working on a lot of people. He's really put the fear of God into a lot of people's hearts, and a lot of people give his voice a lot of credence. So it's disappointing, but I think slowly people are starting to wake up and see him for the manipulative character that he is. Hello? Ooh. Hello? No sound.
Sorry, I think Joe muted us. Can you hear us?
I can hear you perfectly. No, all good. No worries.
So regarding the fear, obviously we know COVID-19 has been part of that fear to implement all these drastic laws and regulations and stripping away people's freedoms. It's clear to see that's not a conspiracy, that's fact. But the real fear now is that the economy down there, people's jobs, their livelihoods, their businesses, children not going to school. How long is this going to go on for? You know, are we now
that's a good question.
What's going on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess that's anyone's guess. What we're witnessing is most definitely Andrews is doing anything and everything within his power in order to extend the lockdown measures for as long as possible. So, a lot of people are definitely feeling frustrated. Businesses are closing down that will never reopen. But we're also seeing a tremendous amount of hypocrisy. It seems that workers that have either government jobs or government contracts are allowed to work. We're seeing tremendous amounts of tradies from Melbourne heading to different parts of the state, such as Shepparton, to work on government projects like schools, etc. We see large groups of council workers walking around the streets, spraying Windex on light poles. Yet if you're a sole trader and you mow people's lawns for a living, you're not allowed to work. So we see a tremendous double standard, and the people in the private sector are really being assaulted very badly, and it seems that people in the public sector or people who are working on government contracts are able to work as usual. So I think that's going to cause a lot of distrust in the government, because the double standard is really obvious.
Yeah. You know, speaking of double standards, the same things happen here in Queensland, where people can't come in here, whether it be for a funeral, for the loss of their loved one. What was the other scenarios that played out?
Well, there's, people can't attend funerals, but what they can attend is the AFL Grand Final. And so obviously, sadly this year, the AFL Grand Final is leaving Melbourne and it's actually coming up to Queensland, and it's allowing 30,000 people to attend the game, which is, again, just more hypocrisy of rules, that we can... in the name of the government, if it's bringing money into the economy, and I think one of the
if it's bringing money into the economy, that's fine. But if you want to come and see your loved one for the last time before they pass away, or to their funeral, you can't come because you're not bringing $1 into the economy. And then you got people like Tom Hanks, who'd flown in here with his whole film crew to Broadbeach and the Gold Coast. And that was okay for him to do that, and yet we can't even fly between our own borders to check on our loved ones.
And there's loved ones that are coming from Canberra, where there are absolutely no cases. And unfortunately, they're considered a risk. So, and I guess another hypocrisy event that we did see unfold was, the Black Lives Matter. That was fine. We had people protesting all over the world, all over Australia. But then obviously recently with, the freedom protests, they've obviously have been a big no-go for anyone speaking up against the government narrative. Anyone not conforming have been shut down and are being silenced. And so, like I said, the lies have just continued.
I'm curious to know, Morgan. How do you feel about the police state that you are in at the moment? Because we're seeing all this horrible footage come out of Melbourne, of innocent people being arrested and manhandled, right down to elderly people sitting on a park bench having signs ripped out of their hand and phones confiscated. How do you feel about all of that going on around you?
It's very, very confronting. I just wanted to check, are you still able to hear me okay? Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, I can hear you. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, you're right. Victoria has turned into a police state, and nobody ever thought they would witness what's going on, and it's very confronting. It's very disheartening. We're seeing scenes that resemble Hong Kong, where, of course, large amounts of police are issuing fines, arresting elderly people, smashing the doors in of people who are planning protests. It's not something that we ever expected to see. The police have been very heavy-handed with people protesting against the lockdown, and unfortunately this is causing a tremendous amount of damage to the relationship between the public and the police. I'm sure both of you would understand that it's very important for a society, for societal cohesion, that there is a respectful relationship between the public and the police, but that of course is being tremendously undermined. And the scariest part about it is the fact that right now Victoria Police is essentially being controlled by Daniel Andrews and a handful of his mates who have become incredibly sick with power, and they have an entire police force that are there standing by ready to enforce their draconian policy. And you've seen the horrible images, right? You've seen pregnant women being arrested in their own homes, police entering people's properties without search warrants, acting like thugs. It's very damaging, and I'm really ashamed of Victoria Police, and I'm a lifelong supporter of the police. I always have been, and for the first time in my life, I'm actually ashamed of Victoria Police, and I struggle to see how we can repair this damage.
You know, what baffles me is, all of this going on right now, and where are our other leaders? Where are our other parties? How come they are not standing up to this tyranny unfolding in Victoria? How come they're not holding Dan accountable for his actions? Where are our other leaders? Why are they all so quiet right now? I'm baffled.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense that no one else is speaking up. Maybe a couple, yeah, but where is everyone? Are they going to come to Victoria's rescue or what?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I wish that more of our nation's leaders had your mentality, Jess. I wish people thought more like you, because our country was never designed to have internal borders, and you'd like to think that we're a country united, and it's not as if every state is its own individual country. We're supposed to be one, but unfortunately it seems that a lot of the leaders are more concerned about what's going on in their immediate surroundings and not so much paying attention to what's going on in Victoria. There are some good people around the country. Craig Kelly from New South Wales, federal member of Parliament, has been doing a tremendous job standing up for Victoria, and I know that many Victorians are grateful for him. He has been making regular posts on Facebook to express his solidarity with the people of Victoria, which is really, really comforting. Campbell Newman, the former Premier of Queensland, has been speaking out against Victoria Police. He actually is on record referring to them as, quote, shame of the nation, and he has been speaking out for us. But it would be nice to see other people speaking up, because this is inhumane what is going on Victoria. Parliament has been shut down multiple times. We're essentially a one-party state right now, being run by the greatest maniac in Victorian history, Daniel Andrews, and a handful of his mates, who are absolutely drunk with power. And hopefully more people get involved, because Victoria is worth fighting for.
Oh, definitely, and it breaks my heart to see what's going on there. I mean, we've got friends and family that are down in Melbourne as well, personally affected, lost their jobs, about to lose their homes. All of that's carry on that comes with these lockdowns, and it saddens me that the other states have blocked you all out. They've shut borders. They've closed borders to you guys, and that's a real scary thing. I just want to know, are you aware of the extra powers that they're trying to gain at the moment to detain COVID high-risk spreaders?
Whatever that means.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes under the emergency powers under the Public Health and Wellbeing Act in conjunction with the state of emergency to basically people who are considered a high risk can be detained. They can have their houses entered without a search warrant. It's pretty serious stuff, but we're all concerned that that's going to further increase and that those powers may expand beyond simply containing people because they're a high risk of spreading the virus. We're concerned that maybe these powers will spread to, say, detaining people who post certain information on the internet, online. It's not entirely crazy to think that may happen. That's happening in Hong Kong right now, so it can happen here. And yeah, it's a very uncertain time for a lot of Victorians, and we're all feeling increasingly wary of the government, and many people are feeling untrusting of the extraordinary power that the government has taken on board.
Yeah, I think in all my life, and obviously living in Australia, I never in my life did I imagine ever that there would be a state or anywhere in Australia living under police, martial law and kind of seen almost socialism and communism unfold.
And to me, I just thought about it before. To me, those powers can also extend to families who don't want to get vaccinated. That's how I saw
absolutely.
it.
That's a tremendous concern that many people have. Our Prime Minister scared a lot of people recently when he made a reference to mandatory vaccines. He said something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing here, but this is fairly accurate to what he said. He said he would expect for the COVID-19 vaccine to be as mandatory as it possibly could be. And of course, that scared a lot of people. He later backtracked on that particular statement, but it's a very, very concerning idea that a vaccine could be either be made mandatory, or that we could end up in a scenario whereby people who refuse to get vaccinated could potentially be punished in one way, shape or form, or restricted from accessing private and public services like public transport, travel, health services, childcare, other types of government services. And it's not unrealistic to think that may happen. We see many apps being developed around the world that are designed to keep tabs on vaccines that we've taken, medical tests that we've taken, such as COVID-19 tests, and having those results uploaded into an app that must be used in order to access certain services. The UK is leading the charge on the development of one of those apps called ProV Pass, I believe, and we see social credit scoring systems in China which inhibit citizens' capability, again, to access public and private services based on their social credit score. And we don't want that coming to Australia. We don't want any form of medical tyranny. I think most people would probably agree that when it comes to medication, drugs, etc., vaccines, it should be the right of the individual whether or not they want to take that, not the right of the government to dictate what we can and what we do and don't put in our body. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I believe we should always have sovereignty over our health. That's our body, that's our temple, and no one should have a say, like my body, my choice. It should always be that way. And I'd be selfish if I was a pro-vaxxer to think that you should get vaccinated for my own selfish reasons because I believe that it's a good thing. No, people should still have the choice because at the end of the day, it's their body, their choice. But when you have, and you can see it unfolding, the plans and the structure put in place to implement this mandatory vaccine, and the background work has already been done. We're seeing it, and if anyone's still working at the moment, you go into your health regulations, your COVID regulations for your workplaces, they're starting to implement all these little things with gloves and mask, and so they're trying to create this new normal and condition everyone to accept it. But why are we still focusing on this stuff when we know the virus has a 99% survival rate? The only ones who are very, very affected from the virus are the elderly and those with comorbidities. Yet we're going to suffocate and control the rest of it because of this one problem. I mean, I don't know how to word it properly, but I mean, that's basically what we're doing right now. You're right. We're doing all these inhumane stuff to implement this new lifestyle that they want to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I guess one of the things I always ask is who stands to make the most money out of a vaccine? We look at these alternative solutions to fighting COVID-19, such as hydroxychloroquine and other drugs and supplements such as zinc when used in the correct dosages. But what we find with those particular drugs is that they're not under any sort of patent. They're not. Nobody holds the intellectual property rights to those drugs because they've been around for so long, meaning they're very cheap to produce, and not one pharmaceutical company stands to make a tremendous profit off one of those drugs. Whereas the creation of a vaccine, you could have a situation where a pharmaceutical company holds the intellectual property rights and stands to make billions of dollars. So I think a lot of the time it comes down to following the money trail and considering who stands to make the most. And it's really it's really concerning to think that this sort of money making exercise is getting in the way of, well, not just in the way of our freedom, but quite potentially oppressing us. It's quite horrible.
And that was something that I really noted a little while ago, just a few weeks ago, when they started talking about the mandatory vaccine. It was that we have, we've gone from fighting for sovereignty over our land to fighting for sovereignty over our body and having the right to decide what we put in. And I think it's a really personal choice. It's like making a smoker, a non-smoker smoke, or making a vegan eat meat. And so to me, it just seems really unlawful and starts to question, like, what is the true agenda behind what's really going on? Is that when we are forcing vaccines, especially when we know now that the virus has a 99% survival rate, it's not as deadly as they're making it out to be, but yet they're having these extreme measures all implemented in the name of COVID. But look, I guess, one thing I did want to talk to you about, Morgan, and I guess something that you've been speaking about on your own lives, and something that I didn't really know a lot about, but you made me look more into, was the Belt and Road Initiative. And it really raised a few red flags for me. So I guess even looking at the initiative, I guess from my understanding, I guess it's been established, I guess, maybe by China, and it's a program to connect, Asia with Africa and Europe for land and maritime networks, I guess, along 6 corridors with the aim of improving regional integration, increasing trade and stimulating economic growth. But look, I guess, you've got a bit of a background in international trade and foreign policy and whatnot. So for those who don't know much about it, can you kind of explain, first of all, what it is, maybe in simple terms?
Yeah, sure. So the description you just gave is that's very much what the Chinese Communist Party would like you to think it's all about. The Chinese Communist Party would like you to believe that they created the Belt and Road Initiative out of the goodness of their heart in order to help developing nations develop infrastructure for the purpose of increasing their trade and building jobs and building their GDP, etc. But what we see with the Belt and Road Initiative since its launch is basically it's China's extraordinary vision to expand their influence throughout the world via means of infrastructure loans and resources acquisition. So through using Chinese construction and commercial banks, the Chinese Communist Party basically enters countries around the world in order to commence in negotiations for infrastructure, big builds, and so forth. But a lot of the time, what you'll find is that China will target countries that have either very corrupt leadership or a very poor credit rating, and they do this because these countries are much easier to manipulate. They are much easier to work with China. So we see huge loans going out to these developing nations that are essentially designed in many cases to default. These nations that take out loans from China supposedly for the purpose of building infrastructure are often left in a position where they're just financially unable to service the loans, in which case the projects fail and China will come along and pick up some collateral. It could be a port, it could be resources rights in Ecuador, where they had to cough up the majority of their oil to China at a discounted rate, a port in Sri Lanka. We see many disasters unfolding in Africa, in Kenya, all over the place. So basically, the people that really lose from the Belt and Road Initiative are the citizens of these nations who thought they were getting jobs, they thought their country was going to experience some type of economic growth, and then they find out that, well, there was corruption involved, money was siphoned out of projects to line the pockets of pro-Beijing politicians, like what happened in Malaysia. And the real winners from the Belt and Road Initiative are China. And the greatest concern on a strategic policy level regarding the Belt and Road Initiative is the potential for various projects to be used for military purposes down the track, such as airports and ports. And considering there's a lot of activity in our immediate region, we've seen the militarization of the South China Sea, the establishment of a military base in Djibouti, Africa. Many nations are shying away from the Belt and Road Initiative, mostly well-to-do nations, due to those security concerns. So Australia declined to get on board with the Belt and Road Initiative. It's been rejected by the Pentagon in the United States. Our strategic policy experts have strongly urged against it, yet Daniel Andrews somehow managed to go rogue, circumvent Canberra, and he went and signed Victoria up to it. Now, it looks like his efforts have been in vain, because it looks like the Prime Minister is introducing legislation that is designed to veto such deals that jeopardise national security. But yeah, nonetheless, the fact that he tried to engage in this level of contentious foreign policy is something that we need to make sure can't happen again. That was a bit of a long-winded answer. Did I answer your question or not really?
Yeah, you know, you did. And I did see a little bit on him trying to do a little, Stan Andrews trying to do a little sneaky deal, you know, signing it up and whatnot. But then obviously it's nice to see maybe ScoMo coming in for once and showing authority over, you know, just certain decisions that get made. You know, I guess he can maybe pick and choose. I don't know.
With the whole Roundabout initiative, does this give China more control over our supply and demand chains?
Well, China already has a tremendous amount of influence in Australia. You know, largely due to the amount of resources that they purchase us and the political and cultural influence that has taken place since that. But yeah, the Belt and Road certainly opens up many avenues for China to gain access to otherwise unattainable markets, you know, such as resources and infrastructure builds. And it also gives the Chinese Communist Party various avenues to engage in further methods of espionage, political influence, and so forth. So I think the Prime Minister has done the right thing by pushing this legislation. The jury's out, and the consensus is quite final that the Belt and Road Initiative is bad for national security. So I'm glad to see ScoMo doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's great to know. I mean, it's obviously a very good initiative to keep an eye on, because apparently the plans are going till 2049, where they'll have this whole bout set up. And I mean, China's already winning because they got about $340 billion in construction contracts for it. So quite smart if you look at it that way. To me personally, I'm just worried about how it's going to affect our small nations, our poor nations, especially if they can't pay them back, pay those loans back, what it's going to mean for them and their little islands, because we know China's all up in here buying up the Pacific as we speak, and making all deals. And obviously when you have a sellout leader in power, who are happy to sign those papers over and sign your country over, while they're throughout their term, they can sign, say goodbye, move on with their life. Next leader comes in and tries to fix up the mess. But thank you, Morgan, for enlightening us a bit more about the Belt and Road Initiative. It's probably something that everyone should
be across.
And
like I said, I didn't really know much about it. I kind of heard about it, heard you speak about it, and it really got me looking into it and trying to understand. I think sometimes a lot of us don't pay attention to these types of things. It's a bit like numbers. At the moment we're talking about COVID cases, COVID numbers. You start throwing numbers at people, it's too much for people to comprehend. You're like, oh, maths, numbers, I don't do well with numbers. But I think it's definitely something that we need to be aware of. I guess in terms of, I guess if you've got any advice for people that just are tuning in, watching in,
especially with your movement that you've got, Protect Australia. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that before you take off?
Giving me that opportunity. I think that here in Australia, our biggest problem has been our lack of interest in public affairs, and we've been so interested in things like pop culture and sports, etc., that we haven't been paying attention to our elected officials and what they've been doing behind the scenes. So really the whole purpose behind what I'm doing is I'd like to encourage my fellow Australian brothers and sisters of all over the country, wherever they're from, to really start paying more attention to the actions of our politicians. Stop listening to what they say and pay attention to what they do. Get involved. Try to reach out to your local MPs, and hopefully we can come to the realization that unfortunately politics is a blood sport, and I think we all have the civic duty to roll up our sleeves and get our hands a bit dirty, because unless we're strong and unless we unite as people to make our voices heard, freedom can be taken away from us, and Victoria is proving that. So that's basically my message. That's what I'm all about, and just trying to bring as many people together as possible, and that's it.
Yeah.
Oh wow! Thank you so much. What a beautiful message. And you know what? You're so right. People need to come together. We need to speak up. We need to speak about these things more, instead of letting them silence us and take and censor us, which is what they're doing right now. We need to come together and speak about it and hold our leaders accountable for what we put them there for. We put them there to stick up for us. We put them there for our freedoms. And are any of them staying true to their word? Most of them never do. So you're right. We need to start following them, make sure they're accountable, making sure they are going to do what they say they are. And what are you recommending?
I think you made a really good point there. Is actually looking at their actions, because you can always say one thing but then do another. And right now, what I see a lot of that happening is the actions are really speaking louder right now with the dictatorship that's going on, with the lies that continue we get fed, and yet people are still believing it. So
it's so sad.
But look, thank you
Morgan,
so
for coming on
much
tonight. Look, we're going to keep you in our prayers. We're going to keep Victoria in our prayers. We're going to be fighting for you guys while we're out here. We go to our freedom fighter protests because we're all about freedom. We're all about humanity. You got to get out there. You have to voice your opinion, because guess what? Your silence is consent, and we don't want that. You have to get up and speak sometimes, and whether that's standing there holding a sign or going to listen to these people speak at these freedom protests, you have to get out there and educate yourself one way or the other. And we're going to keep you guys in our prayers, and we're going to keep fighting for you from this side.
Absolutely.
Wise
Absolutely.
words. Very great words. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Morgan. It's been an absolute pleasure, bringing you on and actually just meeting you and getting to know you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us tonight, okay? And all the best. We'll talk to you soon.
Jojo Jess, thank you. God bless.
Thank you,
Look
mate.
after yourselves. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
God bless. Oh, guys.
Oh man, what an amazing man! My heart breaks for them, especially down there in Victoria. Everything that they're going through.
Yeah, it's really, really, really tough. And, we've got a lot of friends in Melbourne. We've got friends all over the world. But, I really do worry for our friends in Melbourne, knowing what they're going through.
Yeah.
And just seeing, I guess with the state of emergency being extended.
Yeah. And Morgan, he's one of the very few that have the guts to get up and speak up about the tyranny that's going on down there. I mean,
and I really take my hat off to people that do, because, we know firsthand what it's like to have an opinion and then to be shut down or to be criticised because apparently you're not an expert. But no, we are the public and we have a general concern of what is actually going on, especially when we see our rights being affected. We see our freedom of speech being stripped away.
We see innocent people getting locked up every day for petty shit.
Yeah, and everything being, carried out through the eyes of another agenda, through COVID. That's how we see it, and I don't know how you cannot see it another way when, our leaders, it feels like they are continuously lying to us.
So keep Victoria in your prayers, guys. They need a lot of prayers, a lot of uplifting, a lot of strength to get through what they're going through down there, and hopefully a lot of angels to come along and save the state.
Save us all.
Save us all.
All right, guys. Well, that's it for another week. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. If you've got any feedback, let us know. And we've got another show next week coming up with Jamie McIntyre.
Yeah.
Another wonderful guy. Like I said, we always like to get different people on to really talk about different issues. Jamie's the founder of the Australian National Review. Very successful entrepreneur who's also, I guess, a bit of a truth seeker.
And speaking up about what's going on today. So I'm pretty excited to hear what he has to say next week.
Yeah. All right. Until then, guys, have a wonderful week. Take care. God bless. And we'll see you very, very soon.
Thank you. Love you. Good night.
Love you.
It's all about passion. It's all about change. It's all inclusive every day of the week.